So, what if the real secret to making a workplace safer wasn't in a rule book, but in the CEO's paycheck? It sounds a little wild, right? Today, we're going to dig into this really controversial idea, paying the top bosses big bonuses based on how safe their employees are. Is this a genius move to protect people and profits, or is it just another corporate scam? Let's get into it.
On the surface, it makes sense. Pay for safety, you get safety. Simple. But we all know that corporate incentives can sometimes lead to some pretty strange, unintended outcomes. And that's exactly why we're going to look at a major new study to see what the actual evidence says about this whole trend. To really get why companies are even thinking about this, you have to understand the sheer scale of the problem. $100 billion. That's just a staggering number. That's the annual cost of workers' comp in the U.S. alone. So the stakes here, they're not just high, they are massive, both in money and, of course, in people's well-being.
And when you're staring down cost like that, it's really no surprise this isn't some tiny niche idea anymore. Tying a CEO's pay to things other than just pure profit, what we call ESG or environmental, social, and governance goals, is becoming super common, and worker safety is a huge piece of that puzzle. We're talking more than half of the biggest companies in the S&P 100 are doing this now, which makes our main question more urgent than ever. Does it actually work?
Okay, so let's start with the skeptical side of things. The critics have a pretty strong argument that these safety bonuses, or workplace safety incentives as the researchers call them, could be a total sham. And they usually point to two big reasons. Let's break those down.
Right, so this really gets at the two sides of corporate cynicism, doesn't it? On the left, you've got window dressing. This is the idea that it's all just for show, for good PR. The real incentive isn't to actually make the factory floor safer, it's just to make the numbers look better. And this can create a really dangerous situation where managers might even pressure workers not to report an injury. Then on the right, we have rent extraction. This is the theory that powerful CEOs basically lean on their boards to add these kinds of soft goals because, well, they're easy to hit. It's not about safety at all, it's just a way to guarantee a fat bonus, a way to pull extra cash out of the company.
But of course, there is another way to look at all of this. What if these bonuses aren't cynical at all? What if they're just smart business? Let's take a look at that alternative idea.
So this theory is called efficient contracting. And the thinking here is pretty straightforward. The company's board is just being rational. They know that workplace accidents are incredibly expensive. We're talking lawsuits, lost workdays, skyrocketing insurance premiums, not to mention a trashed reputation. So they offer the CEO a bonus to improve safety, because frankly, the financial payoff from a safer workplace is way bigger than the cost to that bonus. The key takeaway here is that it's not a scam. It's a strategic move to get the CEO's personal financial goals perfectly aligned up with the long-term health of the company.
All right, so we have our two competing ideas. It's either a scam or it's smart business. Now it's time to put them on trial. Let's see what happens when we actually look at some hard evidence from the real world.
Let's just cut right to the chase. Back to our most important question. When a company dangles a safety bonus in front of its CEO, do fewer people actually get hurt? Let's forget the theories for a second. What do the numbers really tell us?
And here it is. This is the big headline from the study. Companies that offer these safety bonuses have a 37% lower rate of on-the-job injuries and illnesses compared to companies that don't. And that's not some tiny statistical blip. That's a huge, significant difference. And here's what that looks like. You can see it plain as day. On the left, you've got the average injury rate for companies that don't have these bonuses, and on the right, way lower, are the companies that do. A 37% drop is a real improvement you just can't argue with. But are those numbers actually real? Okay, so we see the reported numbers are lower, but that leads us right back to our first skeptical theory, right? Window dressing. Could this just be a case of managers hiding injuries to make sure the CEO gets that big bonus?
This is where the researchers were really smart about it. They didn't just take the company's word for it. They went and looked at independent third-party sources. And guess what they found? The firms with safety bonuses also got better safety ratings from independent agencies. And maybe even more important, they got fewer fines and penalties from OSHA, the government's official workplace safety police. This is really strong evidence that the improvements are real, not just some trick with the paperwork.
So that's a pretty big hit to the window dressing theory. But what about our other skeptical idea, rent extraction? Is this whole thing just a backdoor way for powerful CEOs to grab an easy bonus that a less powerful exec couldn't get away with?
The researchers tested this one head-on. They divided up the companies based on how powerful the CEO was.
A common way to measure this is to see if the CEO is also the chairman of the board. Now, if the rent extraction idea were true, you'd expect these bonuses to be a total joke for the powerful CEOs, right? Just an easy payday. But that's not what the data shows at all. The impact on the injury rate, it's negative and significant for both groups. It just doesn't matter if the CEO is super powerful or not. The incentive works anyway. And that really pulls the rug out from under the rent extraction argument.
So, after putting all the theories on trial and looking at the evidence from every angle, what's the final verdict? And maybe more importantly, what does all of this mean for how we think about business?
The authors of the study really put it plainly. After all their tests, after checking for underreporting, looking at CEO power, and controlling for a ton of other factors, their conclusion is crystal clear. The evidence gives overwhelming support to the idea of efficient contracting.
So, the verdict is in. And based on the best evidence we've got, these CEO safety bonuses, they're not a scam. They aren't just for show, and they aren't just easy money for the boss. They actually seem to be a genuinely effective tool that leads to much, much safer workplaces.
And why does this matter so much? Well, for one, it's a huge deal because it shows that you can use money to get real results on important social goals, not just profit. Two, it gives corporate boards a proven tool they can use to protect their people and protect shareholder value from the crazy high costs of accidents. And get this, the study also found the effect is even stronger in places with tougher safety laws or higher insurance costs. That tells you that these bonuses really get managers to focus when the pressure is on.
And that leaves us with one last really interesting question to chew on. We've just seen some pretty powerful evidence that if you design them right, incentives can make a real difference in something as complicated as workplace safety. So, if executive pay can help fix this problem, what other big corporate challenges could we tackle by better aligning pay with the outcomes we actually want to see? Definitely something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.